Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. It is Friday morning the 2nd of August and we're sticking with the Delphi case today because yesterday was day 3, the final day of a 3-day hearing all about Richard Allen. His treatment at Westville was under scrutiny on day 2. And if you want to hear the horrible details of Richard Allen's psychosis and the underlying reason why he confessed 61 times to murdering Abby and Libby, go and watch yesterday's video. Not many people have viewed it. I don't know whether that's because my audience isn't interested in Delphi anymore. I don't know. But all those horrible, heartbreaking details are in yesterday's video. So in today's video, we're talking about the day 3 testimony, and it's a shocker. Another shocker. Let's go.
It's time for you guys to start being journalists.
Before an angry Andrew Baldwin left the courthouse, 13 News overheard him speaking to Richard Allen's wife, saying, "It ain't over. The world's watching. The world sees what's going on."
Alright, so I'll give you the same caveat that I gave you yesterday, that I'm relying on someone else's notes. This is Yellow Jacket. This is a handwritten notes from inside the courtroom. I can't find a typed up version, so I'm going to try and decipher her handwriting. This has been kindly put on the Reddit group Delphi Docs. I don't like using other people's notes because, you know, some things might get lost in translation, but it's the best we've got. It's the very best we've got. This is a foreshadowing of what it's going to be like at the trial. Francis Gull doesn't allow cameras, doesn't allow people to live tweet. So this is the very best we've got. One thing she has changed her mind on though, which is a pleasant surprise, is that she has finally relented and vacated the safekeeping order. You know, the same safekeeping order that did not keep Richard Allen safe, particularly in Westville. His new booking photo does look like he's put on some weight. He does look somewhat healthier than he did when he was at the height of his psychosis. But just think, if she'd have listened in June 2023, when his attorneys eventually got a hearing, they've been saying that Richard was in such a bad way, and then the hearing in June, they were basically rubbished, I guess you would say. Finally, she seems to have listened, whether it's getting the psychologist Monica Waller on the stand, I don't know. But Rick, he's not going back to the Department of Corrections. He is going to be housed in Cass County Jail, which is good for his team. It's just across the street from Brad Rosie's office. So at least he's going to be able to get regular visits from his attorneys for the next 2 months coming up to his trial. So that's great news. That's the only order that she's issued. Everything else she has taken under advisement. Okay, so yesterday morning, the defence called an expert in rituals, ritualistic sacrifices, that kind of thing. And she said it's her opinion, absolutely, that the crime scene, based on the photos that she's been given, was one of ritualistic sacrifice. So obviously that's just an opinion, expert opinion based on crime scene photos. But the information that came out in the afternoon, very, very compelling. And for the first time, Francis Gull actually sat and listened. People in the courtroom say that she listened intently. The hearing went on until about, it must have been 8:30 p.m, 12 hours almost. So she sat and listened the whole time. So that's positive. This, of course, was the day that Brad Rosie and Andrew Baldwin tried to instill on Francis Gull that they want to put forward a third-party guilt defence. Nicholas McClelland, as slick as he tries to be, the prosecutor, does not want them to use this defence. He wants banning of words like Odin, Odinism, Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Elvis Fields, even Kegan Kline. He wants that name banned from the trial as well. So, if you utter the words, you could be held in contempt. But this was a hearing to put that presentation together. And for the first time, she actually sat and listened. They've tried to get this information in front of her for months. Of course, if you've been following this case closely, you will know that it's September 18th of last year when the first Franks motion was released. We all became aware of this third-party guilt defence. And we've got some additional details from yesterday's hearing. So we had testimony from Amber Holder, who is Brad Holder's ex-wife. She would be Logan Holder's stepmother when she was married to Brad. Logan, of course, was the boyfriend of Abby, and Brad Holder lied. He said, first of all, that he'd never met Abby, and then he said he met her once, then he said he met her twice. One time, guess whose house? Patrick Westfall's house. And we had testimony from Murphy and Click. Those are two of the law enforcement officials who investigated the Odinist angle. And, of course, there was another member, Greg Ferenczi, but he can't testify because he was murdered, maybe coincidentally, by an ex-corrections officer. There were some horrendous details via a blood spatter expert about the girls' bodies. I'll just touch on that, and it's a lot. So she's taking this all under advisement. So however long it takes her to, decide on this, I think she's going to take it right up to the eve of the trial. But I've been pleasantly surprised by Gull. So credit where credit's due. The fact she sat and listened for 3 days. The fact that she didn't cut them off, when it passed 5 o'clock. The fact that she allowed the court to carry on until everything was done. And the fact that she's vacated the safekeeping order. I can't argue with that. Credit where credit's due. But let's start with Andrew Baldwin's questioning of Amber Holder. Much of this we know. They are divorced, but they've remained friends. And it's via Amber Holder that we learnt that Brad was scared of Patrick Westfall, told Amber to stay away from him. And this is interesting. Logan kept saying that he missed Abby after her murder. Amber, this particular time, was talking to him. Brad was wasted and said that Patrick Westfall murdered Abby and Libby. But keep your mouth shut or he'll kill you. This dude's a violent guy. But why would Patrick Westfall and his Odinist cronies kill 2 white girls? This extremist form of Norse pagan heathenry. The old Norse religion is a noble religion, and they have bastardized it like extremists of other religious persuasions do. These are the extreme of the extreme, and Patrick Westfall is the head honcho, so to speak, of that local area. Patrick wanted to move on from animal sacrifice, but why sacrifice 2 white girls? Well, seems to be because, at least according to Brad, Abby's mother was living with a black man, so she's a race traitor. I don't know whether even that's true, but why take that out on 2 innocent girls? We don't know the answer to that. But Brad and Patrick fell out. Patrick told the YouTube channel Sleuth Intuition some time ago that it was because Brad had to have his patch taken away because he couldn't decide as to whether he wanted to be an Odinist or a Christian. Patrick found out that Brad was going to Christian church. Can't be having that, can he? Well, okay, so Kevin Murphy and Todd Click went over the details that we know about. Kevin Murphy, that Elvis Fields said, will I get into trouble if I can explain why I spit on one of the girls? Elvis, of course, is the guy who tried to get his sister to take a coat off him. Coat that apparently had blood on it, telling his sister something that somebody who was there, only they would know, on the morning of the 14th of February 2017, before the girls were even found. Elvis Fields seemed to know what had happened. Isn't that strange? Yeah, Elvis Fields being the wannabe. But all of this work that Murphy, Ferenczi and Click did, it fell on deaf ears, because although they were regularly reporting back to Unified Command, nothing was done about it. In fact, they said that Brad Holder had an alibi, so he can't have been there. Can't have been there, because the prosecution's timeline is that the girls were murdered between 2:30 and 3:30 on the 13th of February. And there is some evidence to support that time, but we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, the reason why Brad Holder was cleared so early on, his phone wasn't even checked, these ordinance just weren't considered important enough to explore, because Brad Holder was at work, and he left work about 2:35, but it would have taken him 35 minutes to get to Delphi, so not enough time to actually commit the murders. And then after that, he went to the gym. So yeah, Brad Holder does have an alibi if the time of the murders was between 2:30 and 3:30. Interestingly, though, we learn that there's no time of death listed in the autopsy. Now, I don't know why that would be, because the girls were found within 24 hours. They'd have some idea of how many hours those girls have been dead, based on things like the degree of rigor mortis in the bodies. But no time of death listed. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that convenient? Isn't that convenient? Yes, it is. Very convenient. We learn just how much they believe Kegan Kline. Just how much time they wasted on Kegan Kline's lies. Yet they couldn't be bothered to fully explore the ordinist angle. Why? Why? We don't know. Let's talk about Christopher Cecil. Who's he? Well, he's an Indiana State Police sergeant, and he did the extraction in 2019 and then another just a few weeks ago of Libby's phone data. So we know that the BG video is genuine, that there's metadata, that the geolocation of it is at Monon High Bridge, and the video starts at 14:13 and 51 seconds. It's a 43-second video anyway, so we know that's genuine. There's a picture of the bridge that's on there. There isn't the picture of Abby, though. The picture of Abby on the bridge. It's not on the phone, and I think that's because she took it on Snapchat. So we've got it because people screenshotted it from Snapchat, but it didn't get onto Libby's phone. What we know is that this phone, not based on GPS, but based on the Apple Health app, that the steps stopped. It made no more steps after 14:32 and 39 seconds. That's 32 minutes past 2. So it makes sense for them to think that the girls were murdered shortly after 2:30. The phone didn't move but stayed on until sometime after 4:33 a.m. on February the 14th. Apple Health data won't record steps or movement. Let's say you're traveling in a car, it's not going to record steps. All right, so it didn't record steps going from Libby's house to the trails. So I guess it's possible that that phone was moved via a vehicle. So tests weren't done on how many steps it takes to go over the creek to where the girls were found, how many steps it would take to go to the private drive and then into a car. But my question would be, well, if the steps stopped at 14:32 on the 13th, were there any steps on the 14th, like bringing the phone back? You know, if the girls were taken, they brought back and murdered there in the middle of the night, did it record any steps? We don't know. This is so strange about these text messages. So he confirmed that 15 text messages all came in together at 4:33 a.m. on the 14th. One of them could have not been a genuine text, it kind of failed or something. So 14 for sure all came in to Libby's phone at 4:33 a.m. on the 14th. So why, even though people have been texting them, why did they all come in together at 4:33 a.m? So the phone stayed on. So if the phone had been moved, those texts would have kept coming in, wouldn't they? Why did they all come in together at 4:33? It's just very strange. Was the phone on but put into airplane mode? And that's why the text didn't come through? But it would still record steps. If it was in airplane mode, it would still have recorded any steps that were taken, because that doesn't require a connection to anything. It's inbuilt into the phone. So it's just so curious. I don't know what to make of it, honestly. If anybody's got any ideas, let me know in the comments. Now, finally, let's talk about Patrick Cicero, I think that says. He's a blood spatter expert. He was called by the state. Now, I'm not going to describe everything that was stated here, but basically, he said Libby was slashed 3 times in the neck. Whether this could be done by a box cutter, I've no idea. I don't think so. Nick seems to have got it in his head that the murder weapon was a box cutter. We know it was a knife with a serrated edge. And we know that it cut through Libby's carotid arteries, both of them, and her jugular. So she would have just bled out via the neck. This is a complete slaughter. And this blood spatter expert says there's evidence of blood pooling on the leaves around the bodies, and the way that the blood was on her body was that she was standing or upright when her neck was slashed at first, and then she was dragged. I mean, it's just horrendous. Now, Libby was found naked. Abby was found fully clothed. But this expert doesn't think that she was completely naked when she was killed. There was staining on her body, indicating that her head had been moved. The back of her clothing was saturated. So those that have seen the crime scene photos, and it just looks like Abby's like clean, there was actually blood underneath. So maybe she was sat up at some point. A serrated blade was used. Now, he says that he did experiments on the trees with his own blood, okay, and the easiest way to make the F, which he says looks actually like an upside-down L, when they do tests on the tree itself, the middle stick of the F isn't actually a stick, it's just part of the colouring of the tree, apparently. But with the meaty part of the palm and then the thumb, and that was in Libby's blood, so maybe Libby tried to steady herself on the tree. Now, I did the very same experiments on my tree with fake blood. I couldn't get a palm and a thumb to look any which way like an F or an upside-down L. But I guess it's possible. But there would have been a lot of blood. I mean, a lot of blood. The carotid artery, which is the artery that takes blood to the brain, when a carotid artery is severed, it pumps blood. It pumps it. There would have been blood everywhere. So if Richard Allen was the killer, how come he wasn't absolutely covered in blood? Especially if he used something like a box cutter, because you'd have to be very up close and very personal. So how come he wasn't absolutely sprayed with the stuff? You know, yeah, Sarah Carbo, the muddy and bloody man, but she never saw blood. Allegedly. That was a lie. Allegedly. So there's a lot of questions here that I've got, but let me know your thoughts in the comments about all of this. Horrendous, horrendous. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.